Welcome to our Curious Amalgam, the weekly podcast brought to you by the Antitrust Law section of the American Bar Association. Our Curious Amalgam explores the fascinating and increasingly overlapping world of competition, consumer protection, data protection, and privacy law. Each week, we bring you leading global experts on the most compelling issues of the day. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to our Curious Amalgam. I'm Alicia Downey, and the title of today's episode is Who Are Deon Woods-Bell and Laura Wilkinson? A conversation with two legends of the Antitrust and Consumer Protection Bar in celebration of Black History Month. Here in the United States, February is Black History Month, during which we celebrate the achievements and history of African Americans in this country. This episode is a collaboration with Diversity Advanced, a committee under the ABA Antitrust Law section whose mission is to enhance inclusion, engagement, empowerment, and leadership for diverse members of the antitrust and consumer protection bars and affiliated professionals. The Diversity Advanced team did a lot of the legwork and preparation for the interview you are about to hear, for which we're most appreciative. For more information about Diversity Advanced, you can follow them on LinkedIn or Instagram. Just search for diversity.advanced. My co-host today is Jaclyn Phillips. Jaclyn, would you like to introduce our two legends?
Absolutely. Our legends here today are Deon Woods-Bell. She is a senior advisor at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where she works on a range of issues related to emerging technologies, data privacy, consumer protection, international law, and much more. She has also previously served as senior international attorney at the Federal Trade Commission. We're also here with Laura Wilkinson, who serves as the Global Antitrust Counsel at PayPal. There, she specializes in competition law all over the world and advises senior management on antitrust issues globally. Previously, she was partner at Weil Gotshal in DC, where she focused on assisting her clients with complex mergers and acquisitions. We're so grateful to have you here today. Welcome to the show, Deon and Laura.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you. Likewise. Great to be here.
So we're going to jump right into the interview of you both and starting as far back as you want to go. And I'm going to start with Deon, but I want to hear from both of you. Can you tell us a bit more about your journey to antitrust and consumer protection? Did it start in law school with those courses?
Wow, you want me to go way, way back, don't you, Jaclyn? Well, no, it didn't. For me, it didn't start in law school. It actually started at the law firm. I was in a big law firm in Washington, D.C., where I started to look at issues dealing with technology and data privacy. I then went in-house and covered more technology-focused issues. In those days, it was the wild, wild west of figuring out the legal regime for the World Wide Web. So regulatory practices, mergers and acquisitions. Then I went to government, and now I'm in philanthropy and not in a nonprofit. And so it's been a range of different venues and diverse topics, but the journey has definitely been great. So consumer protection and data privacy is my jam. And I did do mergers and acquisitions, but these days I'm centering on technologies broadly.
That's awesome. And, that's a question I often get being an antitrust lawyer. Did you take it in law school? And I didn't. And it's great to hear from you that you can learn these things just through your career in various roles. So I'm sure that, a lot of people are relieved listening to that today. And Laura, what about you? Where did your journey start with these issues?
Very interesting question. My journey started probably a little bit further back than Deon's in my career. I got interested in antitrust from a summer internship that I did during law school. I was a summer intern at IBM in the legal department, and that started my interest in antitrust law way back in the 80s. That was an issue that IBM was dealing with, or at least interested in. And I did take antitrust law in law school, and luckily I had an adjunct professor at that time teaching, and so he put a very practical bent on it and focused on things that were new developments in the 80s, like the merger guidelines. And so it really kicked off my career in antitrust. I began, which wasn't part of your introduction, I began my antitrust career at the Federal Trade Commission. And I was there for 10 years focusing on mergers and acquisitions. And then that brought me later to law firm practice. And now I'm in-house at PayPal.
Thanks for that additional context. You've really been, seeing antitrust law from many different contexts, which I think is a good kind of segue into this next question. And it's kind of a big one, but considering, where you started hearing about this in law school in the 80s and being at IBM and working at the government, has your perspective of the field of antitrust, changed since you first took that course and had that internship to today when you're now in-house?
Yes, I've seen a lot of change in the antitrust bar over the years. When I started, there were very few minorities involved in antitrust. I'd say there were some women, perhaps more than some other areas of law, but even that was rare to find female antitrust lawyers. And today I see such difference in the composition of the bar. We have many more women and minorities today, and that's been a great progression.
My other question is, outside of both of your very busy day jobs, what are some other roles you've had within the antitrust or consumer protection bars, whether that's professional organizations like the ABA or elsewhere? And, did that kind of play into your career progression in this field? Deon, let's start with you, but I'd love to hear from both of you.
In the ABA, I found a great opportunity to expand my leadership opportunities and to connect with really awesome professionals, both from a personal perspective and a professional perspective. I've served as the co-chair of the Privacy and Information Security Committee. I serve on the Cyber Task Force for the big ABA, for the UN Commission for the big ABA, and I've also been on the Programs Committee for the Antitrust Law section. So a cross-section of different ways I've engaged in the ABA. Outside of the ABA, I really enjoy working on cultural issues and educational issues. So towards that end, I've worked on at the Smithsonian Institute. I serve on the Women's Committee, the SWC as we call it. And we do a lot of work together with the Smithsonian museums, making sure the issues get visibility and that they get grants and access to additional resources to reinforce the mission. And then I work for DC, I work on the Special Education Committee, making sure I stay connected to those issues because I'm passionate about making sure that everybody gets an education, including those with special needs.
That's incredible. And I think we should have another episode on your time management skills, because I don't know if everyone listening to this could do everything you do. So I would love to hear more about that. Laura, what about you? What other things outside of, what you do on your day-to-day at PayPal are you engaged in?
Yeah, so over the years, I've been involved in the ABA antitrust section in a variety of different ways. I have been a vice chair of the FTC committee within the antitrust section. I've also participated in drafting chapters for the Antitrust Law Developments book and other publications of the ABA. My practice for over 30 years was in DC. I'm now in Silicon Valley, but when I was in DC, I served on the DC Bar's Antitrust and Consumer Protections section. I think they don't call them sections anymore, but I was chair of that section for several years. So that was another involvement in the antitrust law bar. Outside of that, I have served on the board of directors for Legal Momentum, which is a women's legal and education defense fund organization that has been around for many years and over 50 years in support of women's rights and equal opportunities for women and justice for women around violence against women and equal protection.
Okay, well, I've got a question now. This question does come from our friends at Diversity Advanced, and the group, that's helped put this episode together, I think, consists of some younger lawyers. And one of the things that they wanted us to ask you was how it felt, and also how did you deal with sometimes being perhaps the only woman in, engaged in a professional project of some sort, or perhaps being the only woman of color. How about Deon? You first.
I think I wish I would have been hanging out with Laura because she has such good experience and such a diverse background. Unfortunately, I wasn't in the room with Laura, but I hope maybe one day we will be. I think what I'm getting at is trying to find allies in the room. So even if you're the only woman, the only person of color, trying to find common ground with the colleagues you're practicing with. Sometimes that happens organically by shared interests. Sometimes it happens by shared passion surrounding the substantive matters that you're focusing on. Sometimes just being in the trenches together, creates a bond like no other. What you call it, the scars up your back, or like whatever trophies you have from the work that you've done. I find great joy and connection with colleagues where, we just go through it together. So going through it together and then, making sure you do that. Also outside of the whatever practice you have, finding those in the same organization, but who have perspective, who can be formal or informal mentors, I found invaluable. Sometimes it's my direct line boss, or sometimes it's those who can just tell me, hey, whisper in my ear or pull me to the side and tell me, these are some best practices you want to keep in mind. These are some additional resources. All of us, no matter what level we're on, can benefit from those types of connections with others.
Well, I agree with everything that she just said. Those are all really good strategies and things that I've employed as well over the years. I think that probably the strategy, if you will, that I've employed is really trying to not focus on the fact that I may be the only woman or the only minority in the room, and really just participate based on the merits of what I'm contributing to the case or to the meeting, and let that speak for itself. In addition, in a professional sense, I've been involved over the years in other professional organizations like my sorority, but other bar associations like the National Bar Association and things like that, where you meet other professionals and can, talk about commonalities, but also how others have approached things like being the only one in the room in their profession or in our legal profession. And so those have been good supportive environments as well to help me make it through. Being a diverse attorney in a space that isn't as diverse as we'd like it to be.
Can I jump in and reinforce what Laura said? I really agree with that. And I think what she also kind of hinted at, but I want to lift up a little bit, is being you is sometimes the value add. So there are moments when just the general practice gives you that connectivity, but sometimes the value add is your own individual perspective. And so that perspective as a woman and as a woman of color can actually give you the kind of nuanced understanding of issues that others might not necessarily bring to the table. So I would say both and, like both integrating with the team, but also elevating your voice and your own perspective can be a way to help you navigate the circumstance of being the only one or one of few in the room.
Yeah, well, I'm going to agree. Being at least a woman attorney of a certain age, that's been my experience too. I've got no time for imposter syndrome, because you can't be an imposter if you're just being yourself, right?
That's right.
Right.
And you're sitting here today telling us about your experiences, and you've both been in the field and seen how it's changed over time. So how would you say that the bar, and I guess the antitrust and consumer protection bars in particular, have changed over time? I mean, Laura, I know you said earlier that there were fewer minorities and fewer women. What do you see now?
Well, as I said in my earlier response, I see quite a change, and definitely a change for the better. And I think it has made our antitrust bar richer to have the diverse experiences and backgrounds and perspectives of female and diverse attorneys. I think that has arisen from, more diversity in the law school setting, but also more awareness around antitrust issues. I know with the Diversity Advance, we're trying to make antitrust more known to to students in law school so that they can see this as a viable area of practice. And I think that has added to the number of people that I'm now seeing practicing antitrust at all levels in the law firm setting as well as in-house.
That's definitely making people know that this is something they could do and something that's approachable, especially with something in antitrust when sometimes you're dealing with a lot of economics and things that might seem out of touch for a lot of people. That's great. And I definitely want to talk more about how diversity has possibly impacted, antitrust even from a substantive level. But before we get there, Deon, I'd love to hear, your views on how the bar has changed. You deal with data and privacy issues that in themselves have evolved. And what have you seen in terms of more diversity in the lawyers who are getting involved in that field?
We could talk about this all day. Let's have happy hour after this and just continue this. Even virtual happy hour is okay. I know we're far apart, some of us. But listen, what really is interesting to me, and I don't know if anybody else is excited about this, but a few things get me excited, or the trajectory of what I've seen. So the human-centered nature of consumer protection. When I first started practicing in law, I was also at the FTC. I don't know if I've mentioned that in a full-throated way yet, but at the FTC, we were talking about the reasonable consumer. And then over time, because I work with international law and with developing economies, many around the world were talking about vulnerable consumers. And in the building, don't tell anybody, I guess everybody's going to know, we talk about the V word. Can we say vulnerable or can we not say vulnerable? Well, it is out of the box now, and everybody's talking about vulnerable consumers. And I think that's so necessary because not everybody is a middle class or average consumer. We have to protect the least among us. And so I'm so excited to hear us go from the fear of saying the V word to saying it in full-throated, full blast way. We got to protect every consumer and protect the most vulnerable consumers in particular. And then the second thing I would say is that we went from looking at laws not existing in many economies around the world, drafting those laws, to now implementation, and seeing how we can work on concrete issues. And as far as international privacy overall, the sea change came with the GDPR, the European Privacy Law Framework. And sad to say that the US was trying to catch up. And now it's not just the GDPR, looking at the framework from the US and from the European framework. So you got privacy laws all over the world. And so some thought leadership from the global south, from India, from Kenya, from Brazil, looking at implementation in South Africa. And so you can't go to any place in the world without talking about how you might protect data. It's so important. And then looking across digital strategies overall, like I do right now, talking about privacy by design, which was a phrase coined at the FTC and thought leadership coming out of the FTC. It's all over the world talking about how you can have a digital economy, how you have digital strategies, including financial services, where I work right now, and have safeguards baked in, privacy by design everywhere. That's what's really exciting to me.
That's great. Thanks for that perspective. Laura, what about antitrust? Have we seen substantive changes in how antitrust has, kind of been more in the news and been more about it's changed what some people are looking as the goals of antitrust. So have you seen sort of a shift in antitrust law substantively as, diversity has evolved with the bar as well?
Yes, I am seeing shifts. I think over the course of my career, the role of economics has increased and changed over the years. One of the things that brought me to antitrust was the fact that I had an economics background, not only in undergrad, but in having an MBA as well. And so I was very interested in the antitrust area because of that interplay with economics. We've seen over the years the increase in the role of economics and economists as part of the antitrust analysis at the agencies, but as well in the courts. And we're seeing shifts now in how economics is used and the goals of economics in antitrust and where that may change or how that may change over the years with perhaps changes in legislation, not only in the U.S., but in Europe and around the world, is making the area very dynamic right now. And one of the things I would say I've seen in the last several years is increase of antitrust in the mainstream press. Just seeing articles about antitrust in, all kinds of newspapers and magazines where you would never have seen an antitrust article at all. Seeing antitrust even in like commercials and things like that on TV. So there's been a lot of change and interest in antitrust over the years, and I think that's good because it's maybe beginning to demystify it a little bit, and I think that will be good for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was getting my hair cut not too long ago, and my hairdresser started asking me a question about, a merger that was just in the news, and I was caught off guard. I'm like, this is what you want me to talk to you about? But it's awesome because it's, I think it's definitely opens a door for, younger people getting into the field to just realize it's something they could do and something that's interesting and fun, and, hopefully will open the door for new perspectives as well.
Here's a question we have for both of you. What is your favorite memory of the time that you've worked in antitrust and consumer protection? Deon?
Wow, really hard, but let me share something like a connected memory. So my favorite memory is seeing the Zambia Competition and Consumer Protection Memory, become the president of the International Consumer Protection and Enforcement Network. And that's really important because they were the first African authority to have international leadership of a global network. And I remember when they first had a law, which we provided comments on, technical assistance, they learned so much, and then they spread their wings and they became the leaders. And I'll connect that to a memory in my current role where I was at the United Nations together with our co-chair, Bill Gates, and seeing African leadership and African issues on the international multilateral agenda. That gives me so much joy to see Africans really take charge and know that everybody has a role to play in the global ecosystem focused on digital issues.
Very inspiring. Laura?
Wow, that was a great story. I don't have anything as interesting as that, but I will say that I did have a chance to travel to Jamaica when I was at the Federal Trade Commission to provide technical assistance to the Jamaican Federal Trade Commission. And so that's my international antitrust experience at the leadership level. But the one experience I would say, it's not substantive, but just recently we have started the Black Squad within the ABA antitrust section. And that is a favorite experience for me in the sense that as we've been talking about diversity on this program, to participate in those meetings and see today so many African American lawyers who are practicing antitrust and consumer law at all levels and in all different areas, whether that's government or private practice or in-house or even as an economist, for example. So it is just so heartwarming to see the breadth of diversity and the numbers of people that we now have in the antitrust and consumer bar section. So that is a favorite memory for me, and something, luckily, we're meeting monthly, so I get a chance to relive that each month.
So we've had, such an uplifting conversation and talked about a lot of positive changes, but is there anything about the future of the bar that makes you a bit nervous or something you want our listeners to really be thinking about? And Laura, I'll start with you and then same question to Deon.
No, I don't think so. I like to have more of a positive attitude, and so I wouldn't want to, focus on anything negative. And I've seen, as we've talked about, a lot of positive change over the years, and I just anticipate more of that as the practice gets more diverse and more open to ideas and people of different backgrounds. I think it's all going to be positive.
That's great. Deon, anything to add?
Yeah, well, I'll try to walk a tightrope. I don't want to be a fear monger, but I do want to ring the alarm bells for artificial intelligence. If we don't get it right, if we don't watch the data, if we don't worry and course correct for misinformation, we could be in a bad situation. So I want to call it out as an opportunity, but I do want to ring the alarm bells. If the bar doesn't pay attention, if we don't have the right laws, if we don't have the right minds focused on it, then it could go terribly bad. But I think it's great because it's an opportunity for all of us to dive in and focus on these really complex but exciting areas. And I have my hopes pinned on the next generation and young lawyers in particular.
Speaking of young lawyers, we often ask our guests whether they have any advice for young lawyers, but I'm going to flip it a little bit and ask whether you have any advice for old lawyers about ways to continue to build and maintain the momentum of increasing diversity in antitrust and consumer protection. How about you, Laura?
That's a very interesting flip on that question. And I guess it's appropriate for me because I am an old lawyer. But I would say that what our responsibility as older lawyers in the antitrust bar is to really give back as much as we can in terms of mentoring and encouraging not only those who are already practicing in antitrust or consumer protection law, but those that are in law school or thinking about law school to help them see that there is a path forward, not only as a role model, but answering questions or being helpful to their decision making as they plan their careers, to the extent that you can plan a career. So I think giving back is the biggest advice I would give to older members of the profession.
How about you, Deon?
Yeah, I'm not going to call us out as old. I'm going to say we're seasoned. And for seasoned attorneys, I think Laura is spot on. Stay connected to younger folk and make sure you have your ears open, that not that you're just talking at them, that you're really listening to them. And in that way, I feel like I learn and grow as much from the colleagues who are in a couple of generations down as I hopefully am sharing some of my experiences and giving them some perspective as well. I think that's the best course ahead.
Great. Well, I'm going to take that advice too. Thank you both for an excellent conversation. We're almost out of time, but before we let you go, we're going to do two things we do with every guest. And that's first to ask you each to tell us something interesting about yourselves that is completely outside of your professional life. Laura?
Well, as everyone knows, antitrust law takes up a lot of your time. Law itself as a career takes up a lot of your time, but to the extent that I have free time, I volunteer in the community, as we've talked about with my Legal Momentum and sorority service. But the one thing that people may not know that I also do is I knit. And so that has been a relaxation project for me over the years, to just watch a ball of yarn turn into a sweater, a blanket, or whatever. That is gives me a sense of accomplishment, but also relaxation. So that's my one secret hobby.
That's great. How about you, Deon?
Well, I don't have any hidden talents like Laura, but I get joy from seeing my children. I have 3 children and a dog and a husband, and I get joy from seeing them grow and don't tell my daughter, but I'm so excited that she's doing things like next level than I did. I don't want to say too much because she might take a turn and do something different. But she just got back from Taiwan, living and working there, speaks Chinese. And for me, that gives me so much joy and so much happiness because I'm like, next level, get it, girl, get it. And that with my sons as well. So that's something I'm very excited about.
All right. And that leads us to our final segment of the show, which is a little game we call The Curious Hat.
And now it's time for The Curious Hat.
The game is very simple. We will pull a surprise question out of a virtual hat and read it to you and ask you both to answer it. You've not heard this one before. Jaclyn, would you like to read the question?
Yes. So, what is your favorite season and why. We'll start with Deon.
I like summer because I love the sunshine. It makes me happy and full of joy. You can get wet in the water and not freeze. So I love summer.
Good choice. What about you, Laura?
So I would have said that fall is my favorite season. I like the change in the weather and seeing the leaves turn and all of that. But now that I live in Silicon Valley, don't have much of a fall the way we do on the East Coast. So I'm changing that, and maybe I just like year round because that's the kind of weather we have out here. It's almost the same year round, and I'm enjoying my time in California.
Yeah.
Now Laura's trying to make me jealous.
I know. It's like now I just get to like perfect weather. I don't know.
All right. Well, with that, we want to thank Deon, Laura, the Diversity Advanced Committee. Thank you, Jaclyn, for being a great co-host, and hope listeners will keep listening to our Curious Amalgam.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of our Curious Amalgam, a competition, consumer protection, data protection, and privacy law podcast. It is produced and shared around the globe by ABA's Antitrust Law Section. The opinions expressed by the participants in this podcast are their own and do not necessarily represent their employer or other organizations. If you like what you heard or would like to become a member of the American Bar Association, please check out what the Antitrust section has to offer at ambar.org/antitrust. You can learn more about our podcast at ourcuriousamalgam.com. If you have comments, suggestions, or podcast ideas, please reach out to us at podcast@ourcuriousamalgam.com. Until next time, thank you for listening.